What's up?
Oh, I'm just compiling all the top sports scores, news, and odds so I can make the very best bets.
Me too. BetOnline.ag.
Join today and receive your 50% welcome bonus at betonline.ag.
I think that in the world that we were all operating in, when very logical, sensical world in terms of what could Denver do, what could Boston do, what could LA do, what could the Knicks do. I mean, I think those were very rational, logical conversations. And I think what happened, what we saw what happened is the Lakers decided irrationally and emotionally that they had to have this guy. And there is a logical bent to that, of course, because, LeBron they have LeBron, and this is it. If they don't make this work with LeBron and add that second star, it's an unmitigated disaster. It may already be a disaster. So they had to overspend for it. But to the level that they did is unbelievable to me. I cannot believe how much they spent on this deal. And I agree with you. It's not exactly the same as the Nets deal, but but the comparisons are there
It
in
feels
terms
similar
of
because of the swapping.
it's overdone. Yep. It's way too. I mean, it may be great, but the fact when you see Chris Haynes send out the tweet that says he's still going to free agency is just. It's tough to take. I mean, I don't think it will really matter. Rich Paul will get what he wants out of it. Rich Paul is effectively running the Lakers right now. And so that was the whole gambit, was to get him to a spot where Rich Paul could run the team. And they did. So it worked out. I think the Pelicans got a great situation for themselves. And the disappointment on my part of it, and as we talked about, was really about how the Celtics were this close to being a great team for a prolonged period of time. And a lot of factors. It wasn't just Kyrie. It wasn't just, it's certainly, I probably one of the smaller pieces was Danny Ainge. But they were this close to running the table for a really long time. And unfortunately, other egos and other people's egos got in the way of it. And so here we are. We're back to effectively square one.
Other people's? Are you talking about Rich Paul?
I think Rich Paul. I think Kyrie Irving. I think you could say Terry Rozier and Jason Tatum's, and for a time Jaylen Brown and Mook Morris, and those pieces on that roster that just couldn't find a way to make it work during the season. They created certainly a very negative situation within the team, and one that ultimately, ended up flaming out, not only as a team, but also pushed away Kyrie Irving.
Right. They still would have had to overpay.
Yes.
So I think, in the world that we were operating in, if Danny had gotten reassurances that AD would re-sign, or even that they could get something done, right after the trade or whatever, an extension this year. If Anthony Davis said, no, I want to be with Kyrie and I want to be in Boston, I think Danny probably still matches something up here. And maybe not exactly, but I still think he finds a way to potentially do the deal. Even if he does overpay. There was a concern, and I thought Sherrod Blakely's article on NBCSN or NBC Sports was really, really good. I thought he broke it down very well today. Well, by the time anybody listens to this, yesterday. But I thought it was broken down really well. And, there was a lot of people within the Celtics organization who thought, well, even if we trade for him, there won't be enough left to be really good. But I don't know that that's true. I mean, if Kyrie had stayed, et cetera, I mean, you would have had Hayward rebounding, from a bad season and a really difficult injury the season before that. He has his first off season of true getting ready, and they had Al Horford. I don't think, even if they had to give up Smart, Brown, and Tatum, that they wouldn't have been contenders. I still would have been unhappy. I'm very happy that this is the way it played out. And I know there's a lot of people that think that's crazy, but I also know that there's a huge part of the fan base that kind of felt the same way. I really want to see what this team can do. It looks like Kyrie is all but out the door to Brooklyn. And I think everybody's just kind of waiting for it to be formalized. It's almost so openly being discussed that way that it's almost like it's a foregone conclusion. And obviously Bull Pett had a lot of fire, not just smoke, but there was a lot of fire in his reporting around that too. And lots of discussions with other front office personnel about how this stuff kind of plays out in the locker room. But I'm really excited to see what they're going to do, man. I wanted them. Here's one of the things I loved about the championship in 07 and 08 is they still had Paul Pierce. They still had this guy who went through it that we saw come up, and really try to put it together. And you've got to have one of those pieces, in my opinion, for it to be as enjoyable as you want it to be. So there's my take on that, John.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think in the Nick Gelso, Justin Poulin world, there is the emotional attachment to that is absolutely helpful, and it builds and binds the way it works. But with what you see out there right now, I don't think the folks in Toronto were all that heartbroken because Kawhi Leonard had been there about 5 minutes and led them to a championship, and that's that. And I'm not saying that that's a similar situation. Certainly Kyle Lowry
Yeah,
was
it's not
part of
similar
that,
because they had
but
never won a championship, period.
right,
And
but
they've been getting their butt kicked, and now they're on the
sure,
back end of this
sure.
window.
But winning
And
solves everything, and I don't. So
ah,
I hear you, but
they
people weren't
could
all that
go.
excited about Paul Pierce in 2005 when he had ace bandage around his head.
They could be garbage next year. I
Well,
mean, seriously, it could have
right,
happened that fast
they
for the
could,
Raptors.
but I guess what I'm saying is that going back to that Rich Paul piece, my concern is what the league is turning into, and I know that sounds very old man, but it just if you're not going to be able to build teams because it'll be short circuited, um, because Rich Paul wants to be because the agent wants to be in charge of the team, then that's trouble. I mean, look, you want to talk about the Chicago Bulls? Go back to the '90s, and people say, "Well, David Falk and Arn Tellem and all these guys, they ran those teams." Not like this. Not at all like this. Rich Paul is at a different level compared to what was going on in the '90s with Falk and those guys. I mean, clearly Phil Jackson ran that locker room. Clearly Jerry Krause was putting the pieces together. I mean, it's completely flipped on its head now. I mean, there's no comparison. So don't tell me it's the same. It's not the same, And that's the hard part is that as a fan, I want to have that same experience that you're talking about. I want to be invested with these guys, but to build a winner, to get those top tier guys, those LeBrons, those Anthony Davises, those Kawhi Leonards, can you do it without selling your soul to the devil? And that's a really crappy thing about NBA fandom in 2019.
Yeah, except that could just make you love this team that much more if these guys stick around and end up going and doing it. And that's, look, they're going to find a creative way around it. You and I thought the price tag was going to come down on Davis, and instead the Lakers just kept going up. And you can kind of say maybe that's because somebody was playing both sides of the equation. You know what I mean? But that could have consequences, dude. And it's just like we talked about. It's one injury, right? They're kind of on one hand, the Lakers are not doing what Toronto did because they're going to grab this player, and as long as he resigns, then they're going to have a young player, one of the top ones in the NBA for years to come, and that's great. But if he gets injured and the LeBron James window kind of passes, or this year gets so ugly that Rich Paul's like, no, now we're going to New York, or the next destination, the Lakers are totally, totally screwed. And you want to talk about everybody is looking at Danny and saying, oh yeah, nobody wants to trade with Danny. Nobody wants to trade with Danny. I still think that's baloney. I think honestly, if anybody thinks that the deal is in their best interest, then they'll trade with Danny. Not everybody is going to do a deal like the Brooklyn Nets did, but here the Lakers did. So does it work out where everybody has to do that deal with Danny so that that's because he's got a corner on the market for making making other teams do stupid deals? I don't think so. And even then, that Nets deal was pretty crazy with the picks and everything. but it still looked like a good deal for the Nets. I mean, it really did. And they wanted to make a splash, and they had a new owner, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I don't know that it looks bad now, but I don't know that it really looked all that bad back then. They're getting 2 all-star players, and I just have a hard time looking back and looking at everybody say, "Oh yeah, nobody wants to deal with Danny." I don't think that's the case at all. I think
No.
Danny is a shrewd businessman, and he knew not to outbid this. Period.